I love you, Cleveland, and I love you, Ohio. And a very pleasant welcome to this week's version of Bonus Time with Drennan here on the Big Play Sports Network. Hi, I'm Bruce Drennan along with Ryan Smith, my producer. Great to have you aboard. Lots and lots to cover on this week's show. And indeed, we'll be diving into Mark Lawrence's predictions for the upcoming NFL season. And most importantly, our Cleveland Browns and the AFC North. Mark Lawrence, editor-publisher of the Playbook, playbooksports.com. I have my new edition. You see this, Ryan?
I see it. How could I miss Andy Reid's big face?
Andy Reid on that cover. And indeed, I think appropriate considering the accomplishments of the Chiefs these last few years under Reid's leadership. How you doing, partner?
I'm doing well, Bruce. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and I want to certainly the Guardians. I want to devote some time to, obviously and deservingly. We'll get to the Olympics a little bit later, but most importantly, this story breaking about Brook Park and the Browns' new dome stadium. I know that it's not official, but it does appear like it's close, does it not?
Yeah, it does. You know, there's been articles coming out, Northeast Ohio, I forget the exact account, but they came out with a link of a story about, I don't know if it was exactly the proposal, if it was an estimate, whatnot, but all the insiders that know more knowledge than I do, that have the sources, they all seem like Brook Park at this point is going to be an inevitability.
Well, I hope that's not the case. As I've stated here before, and it's only because of my concern for downtown Cleveland. I think it will seriously, economically damage downtown Cleveland, businesses, restaurants, stores. What's going to happen with Tower City? I mean, it's not just the Browns. That's a seasonal sport, we know. But in a mid-level size market such as ours, with very few exceptions, and I can only think of one, and that's Kansas City, the sports venues are all in the downtown area. St. Louis, Pittsburgh, Detroit, Cincinnati. Kansas City's the only one, Milwaukee. Kansas City's the only one that comes to mind that is not. And, of course, they've got a big brouhaha going there about moving over the border into the state of Kansas. But I would be very, very concerned for the downtown area. Downtown is hurting right now anyway, Ryan.
Yeah, you know, they've been talking about this lakefront development since I've been alive. I saw
way before you were born, believe me.
I saw Mayor Bibb come out and talk about what they expect and what their plans are for this lakefront development, but if it hasn't come to fruition yet, I have a hard time believing it's going to be anything soon.
No, if the Browns leave, I don't see it happening in my lifetime.
Yeah.
I just don't. I mean, they've been talking about it for decades, ever since I came to Cleveland, and there's no way. I remember when I was a spokesperson for Swingo's Restaurants, and Jimmy moved, late Jimmy Swingo's, my dear friend, moved from Statler Office Tower, the old Cleveland Plaza Hotel, to the Gold Coast, into the Carlisle and the Witten Place right there, and Pier W's right there too. And that was all supposed to be extended. There was the residential neighborhood there on Lake when you made the corner around there by Clifton, but it's still, it was all talk, all just gibberish by these politicians, these corrupt politicians. You know, I'll say this for the corrupt politicians in Chicago, and there's no more corrupt politicians than the ones that are in Chicago. I know, I grew up there. But at least they get some things accomplished. These politicians in Cleveland have been talking about this for decades. And now to lose the Browns. And another story that I'll reiterate if you haven't heard me say it before. When I was a kid, there was talk. You know, the Bears used to play in Wrigley Field where the Cubs play. which is a joke. They had to put artificial stands up, and it was a joke. So then they moved to Soldier Field. And that wasn't sufficient because Soldier Field at that time was a monstrosity that housed 120,000 people. They didn't need all that extra room. So rather than renovating it, the Bears were talking about moving to a northwest suburb called Arlington Heights, where the racetrack was. And the late Richard J. Daley, the old man, the boss, who's long since passed, was asked at a press conference, what do you think about the Bears possibly moving to Arlington Heights? And Daley said, they can move and call themselves the Arlington Bears, the Heights Bears, the Arlington Heights Bears. But they're not going to call themselves the Chicago Bears. That was the end of it. Until now, where they're talking about doing it again. And this was, this was got to be, 55 years ago, 60 years ago. So, do you think our mayor has that kind of power? Come on.
Yeah, I mean, it's just in today's day and age, the dome rules all. All everybody cares about is the dome. They want to play inside.
I think we need a dome. Don't you agree?
I would like one, but I'm not sure right now it's possible to like, if you're gonna build a dome, you got to build a new stadium. I'm pretty sure that's the way it works. And
well, not according to that Bob Corner that we had on the show sometime back. Remember his proposal?
If that comes to fruition, then maybe we're cooking, Bruce. But other than that, I haven't seen much about it being a possibility. And so that being said, I'm not sure there's room to build a new stadium right here in Cleveland as it is. And the only way, I guess, is Brook Park, and that's what they want to do. The dome,
well, if
I guess,
they move to Brook Park, what are you going to do with the existing stadium and property? What are you going to do with that?
Tear it down, make it part of
the lakefront. The game between St. Ignatius and St. Ed's? Come on, give me a break.
Make it part of the quote-unquote lakefront development. Well, if that ever happens.
Oh. They have the purchase of the Ford plant property already, and they'd have to purchase more, I understand, because they want to build a little mini city. Now, I suppose they want to build the stadium and then the surrounding area like a new Crocker Park, if you will. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan. Isn't that like the general plan? Hotels, restaurants, stores?
Yeah, that's apparently the vision, and that's what it has to be. Because if it's not, then that wouldn't make any sense. Yeah. And that's going to be a process in itself. So it's confusing.
I don't think access would be a problem because you've got both 480 and 71 right there. It would be a pain for East Siders.
Yes.
That's for sure. But be a little more travel time. You probably on a Sunday wouldn't have traffic. Let's say you're coming from Erie, PA, or Youngstown. You're not going to have traffic like that on a Sunday morning. Even if you are a tailgater that gets there at 2:00 in the morning. But I keep going back to how this will affect downtown business and residency. How many vacancies? I mean, with the younger generation living in, because that's who is living in downtown Cleveland. The vast majority of residents who live in downtown Cleveland complexes, condos or apartments, are younger generation. Ryan's age, a little bit older maybe, but what are the isn't there a lot of vacancies?
I believe so, Bruce. I think there is. And I mean, everything kind of changed too with COVID. Like people going to work, like now everybody's inside and I know people barely going to the office. I don't know. That kind of changed everything. And there is a lot of abandoned places here downtown.
So that's what's on the now. How long would it take them to?
Oh God! I mean, I got to imagine it wouldn't be at least till like 2029 that you could be rolling in there. I believe it's like. I mean, it's going to take a year. I feel like of just planning and getting everything ready, and then by that time, 2-year maybe window of building
the current stadium would mean that it would still be an outdoor facility. Is that what I understand too?
I believe if that was the option they do go, it would be cheaper, obviously, but they wouldn't be able to put a dome where it is right now. And that would be the perfect.
Not according to Corna.
Right. If Corna, I'm all for it. If Corna can get the power,
he couldn't even get to see the mayor. Or
that's what I'm saying. If he can get to the powers that be,
he said on our show that he couldn't get to see these influential people like the city council and the mayor and the.
He said he couldn't
get let alone the Browns.
Yeah, he said he couldn't get in with Haslam. If that was a possibility, I think that would literally make everybody happy. You'd stay downtown, you'd get the dome, everything would be jolly. But that's too easy. If it's too easy, Bruce, it's not going to happen.
If Detroit and Minneapolis can have a Super Bowl, why can't Cleveland? But you got to have a dome.
Exactly. And even if you do, I got to imagine like the Detroit, what they did with them, you're going to get what? Maybe one Super Bowl because they threw you some bones. Like, they don't want to come to Cleveland. Let's face it. That's why you get the draft here. That's why these cities like Detroit, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, that's why they get the draft, because they don't host a Super Bowl. And I feel like it's an okay compromise.
Why do you say that?
Because, the Super Bowl isn't going to be people from, like, the people that attend the Super Bowl are people from around the world. And it's in February and it's cold. Like, I'm just thinking of, like, NBA All-Star games. Like, when they're come here, it's fine, I guess, because you're used to playing, like, it's a colder sport, I guess. You're inside all the time. But football, I don't know, you're kind of used to being outside. You want to be in the summertime. That's why you have it in Vegas. That's why you have it in Arizona. That's why you have it in Atlanta.
Florida, et cetera.
Like,
yeah.
I just feel like the NFL wouldn't want to come
all the
here.
activities leading up to the game itself. Right. Yeah, that's a good point. You'd have to be indoors, no question. Well, so what's the next step? Do you hear?
No idea, Bruce. No clue at all. And I don't think, quite frankly, I don't think anybody has a damn clue.
Stay tuned, I guess.
Yeah.
Huh? What else can we do? Stay tuned. Stay tuned for the Guardians approaching the playoffs. By the way, before we get to the Guardians, what's this rumor I hear about the Browns and this receiver from San Francisco who both the Steelers and the Browns want because San Francisco doesn't want to pay him?
Yeah, it's been quite a saga of events, really, for how short the time frame has been. I knew Brandon Ayuk, the receiver for the 49ers, has really grown into his own second-team All-Pro. And it's just like the receiver market nowadays. They're getting paid outrageous amounts of money, and teams can't afford to keep them. I mean, they have Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle. Mind you, the people on defense, Fred Warner, all them, they can't afford, and they're going to have to pay Brock Purdy. They simply can't afford him, and he thinks he deserves top 10 wide receiver money, which I guess his age being and numbers being, he kind of deserves it now. It was originally that the Patriots and the Browns were the two teams that they actually had trades framework, and it was kind of up to Brandon Ayuk to decide if he was going to let that happen. Now, not because he's a free agent, but because he's on his last deal, so no team's going to go make this deal if he don't have a guarantee that you're going to be able to extend him. Well, it turns out now that the Patriots dropped out, and as we stand right now recording here this morning, now I guess it's between the Browns and the Steelers. And there's rumors that the Steelers are the team that Brandon Ayuk really wants to go to. However, they're not willing to pony up that amount of money and trade assets to the 49ers. But the Browns are, but Brandon Ayuk maybe doesn't want to come to Cleveland. So I don't know what's going to happen. It would be interesting. I would imagine you have to give up Amari Cooper. And a lot of people, that sounds horrible because he's been such a poster child.
Peter to pay Paul? That doesn't do any good. If they can pull it off, and you make it a 3-set whiteouts.
The logic would be is that, yes, if it is kind of a lateral move from Amari Cooper to Brandon Ayuk, you would, yes, it would be.
You have a 3-set whiteout. Why get rid of Cooper? I mean, you got to work it out financially. Other teams have done so in the past. I can understand why he'd rather go to Pittsburgh. They've had a lot better track record.
They really have.
Than the Browns.
And the logic.
And now they've been making the playoffs with no quarterbacks. Now they got two.
And the logic between why the Browns would be interested in this trade, because if it is a lateral move, meaning that, yes, Amari Cooper is just as talented as Brandon Ayuk, and I don't think anybody would question that right now, but it's the fact that if you could trade for Ayuk, get a 3-year extension, you have a 26-year-old who's going to be able to play well longer, I should say, than Amari Cooper is right now at this point in his career.
Yeah. No stupid injuries at Greenbrier, were there?
No. Zadarius Smith was banged up a little bit, his knee. He's okay. Deonta Foreman had a very big neck scare, but it turned out he was okay. He got flown to the hospital for precautionary reasons, but he's okay. He's back. I'm not sure when he's going to practice, but he seems okay. And other than that, I believe we're all systems go.
Has Stefanski said how long he's going to play the regulars, if at all, against Green Bay?
Yeah, I know Deshaun Watson isn't playing. I think he said very limited starters will be playing. So I expect Deshaun Watson. I hope he gets a little bit of action, not this week, maybe next week or the third game. But I don't think we're going to see
any
really
word
any starters.
on whether Stefanski is relinquishing play calling
yeah,
duties to Dorsey?
he actually came out, Bruce, and said he's going to retain him.
Yeah.
He'll be calling plays next year.
Yeah. Well, That's going to be very controversial if things go south. Very controversial. And then will his pride and ego, I mean, pessimistically, and heaven forbid, but let's just go there for a moment. Will his pride and his ego allow him to change in midstream?
I think it's certainly easier to go from Kevin Stefanski starting than to Ken Dorsey, rather than it be the vice versa. You give Ken Dorsey the duties and then you go back to Stefanski, because then at that point you maybe have a little bit of a lame duck OC.
Well, I don't think that would ever be in the cards once you commit to the offensive coordinator calling the plays. But I mean, these guys are stubborn.
They sure are.
So we shall see on that front. All right, let me get to the Guardians, because we still have the best record in Major League Baseball. How about that? I mean, it's amazing. We're actually tied with Philadelphia. 67-46 is the record for Philadelphia. We're ahead of Philadelphia, 67-45, so just barely by percentage points. And 35-18 is our record at home, which is the best home record of any team, percentage-wise, the best percentage home record of any team in Major League Baseball. Statistically, our bullpen, even though they faltered a couple of times in this last streak since we were with you last on the air, they have been tremendous all season long. And now we start looking, we've got such an important portion of the schedule coming up. It's brutal. We all know. I'm glad we won the first 2 games against Baltimore, because we were facing tough pitchers in those latter 2 games, which we lost. But indeed, all these, it's like playing playoff baseball until we get to the playoffs. And I think that will be good for this team, provided that we can stay relatively healthy. I'm still a little concerned about the starting rotation, even though I love the additions of Cobb and Boyd. I think Lane Thomas is going to fit in beautifully. He already has, but he's just getting acclimated now to the American League. But I really like where they're at. They're enjoying a 4-game lead on Minnesota and 5.5 on Kansas City, with some very important series coming up. And right now, when you look at the playoff picture, obviously, Baltimore is a shoo-in for one of the 3 wild card spots. It looks like Minnesota's in a very healthy position, and so is Kansas City. I mean, Boston is actually right there, too. Who would have thought that the Boston Red Sox, because they've been overshadowed so much by Baltimore and New York in that division, but the Guardians are in a great spot, and I'd like to see us get that home field advantage for the American League playoffs. I think that would be very important, even though home field in the baseball playoffs is not as vitally important as it is in the NFL, NBA, and NHL. The way I explain that throughout the years, I'll use the regular season as an example. The best teams in baseball lose 50 or 60 games a year. A lot of them are at home. The worst teams in baseball, they win 50 or 60 games, and a lot of them are on the road. So you see, and if you go and look historically at the World Series, and let alone these playoffs, since they came into fruition in 1969, the road teams have won a good percentage of them, a real good percentage of them. So, and we've done so. Excluding 95. I mean, we didn't have home field in 97, and certainly, of course, it was a different format then. It wasn't based on record, but I mean, I'm just going by road to home. And so I think I like our position. I like where we're at. Doubleheader today because of the rain out yesterday. By the way, did you sustain any damage where you live?
I did not, thankfully. However, there were I think a tornado touchdown in Boston Heights, which is quite literally 10 minutes from me. But luckily by me, it was a lot of rain, but I didn't have much damage where I was.
Yeah.
But it was a scary storm.
Yeah, I had Channel 3 on. Betsy Klein was going straight for like an hour and a half, 2 hours without even getting a break. For God's sakes, didn't she have to go to the restroom or something?
She's a professional.
She is indeed a pro. I'll see her in a couple of weeks at the Guardians charity outing at Quail Hollow. So anything else? I mean, the National League looks like Atlanta's got a wild card. San Diego and Arizona. Once again, somebody said to me yesterday on the golf course, hey, Arizona's pretty good. I said, well, yeah, they got into the World Series last year. Yeah, they're pretty good. And now they got Rodriguez back. I don't know how stale he'll be. But he's going to pitch one of the 2 games today. I think he pitches tonight, does he not? I think so. But he's been out the whole year, and he has Cy Young. He's always had Cy Young potential, in my opinion, but he's been injury prone, even going to his days with Detroit and Boston. But indeed, he's going to be a big boost to them, I'm sure, if he can regain his old form. At any rate, here we are heading down the stretch here in the month of August for the baseball season. Won't be long before the playoffs are upon us, Ryan.
Yeah, it's been crazy. It's gone really fast, but it'd be really nice to pick up these 2 games in this doubleheader tonight against the Diamondbacks, get a little more cushion, because then you're going to have to go to Target Field, take on Minnesota.
Yeah.
And really that series is probably going to be the most key series that's left in the regular season, given that they're only 4 games back. I'm confident, but at the same time, Bruce, I mean, it's going to come down to the starting rotation, as we all know. And like you said, it'd be amazing to get the 1 seed because, yes, it's not as important, home field advantage I'm talking about, as like the NFL and NBA, and I completely agree with that. But then at the same time, you do look at the Guardians' home record this year, and it's been stellar. So
it'll also come down to the starting rotation for Minnesota, too. I mean, I'm not discounting Kansas City. I still think they're a year or 2 away. I really do, even though they spent some money this past offseason. But I think Minnesota, I mean, Pablo Lopez has had a great outing, horrible outing, great outing, horrible outing. He's coming off a horrible outing yesterday. So, I mean, they have Ryan and Ober, but their bullpen's not as good as ours here in Cleveland. All right, when we come back, this is the playbook. Mark Lawrence's playbook, playbooksports.com, one of the top handicappers in the country. We're going to preview the Browns, the AFC North, and all of the NFL. We did so with college ball last week with Mark, and we'll be featuring him every week here on Bonus Time with Drennan on the Big Play Sports Network. Now, here is the risk that the Browns had to take with So glad to have you with us. This version of Bonus Time with Drennan here on the Big Play Sports Network. I've been showing you, and I will show you again, the beautiful publication. It is the Playbook. Of course, Mark Lawrence, editor-publisher of the Playbook. This is the newest edition with Andy Reid on the cover, and deservingly, 256 pages of an encyclopedia, if you will. I applaud you, Mark. This may be your greatest edition. I got it in the mail. I've been going through it. Your research, everything is in here for a football fan, college and or pro.
Well, thank you, Bruce. Appreciate that very much. It was perhaps arguably one of the toughest to put together, if no other reason, just the fact that the college football teams in this disarray of realigning conferences, they didn't have a lot of information available. So we had to really knock on a lot of doors to get a lot of information, but thankfully we got it in just before press time.
And then there's the portal that you had to deal with too, right, with all these kids switching schools and such. Last week we covered college, and that was a lot of fun. I want to concentrate on the pros with you this week, Mark, and let's go to our division. The AFC North is without question, I think consensus opinion, the toughest division in all of professional football. Our Cleveland Browns dwell in this division, and I have been saying that I think I'm high on the Browns. I think, and I know you are, based on what you've written. But I do have some concerns, and there are some major obstacles, let alone being in the same conference with the defending Super Bowl champion Chiefs. There's Buffalo to contend with. Miami's come into their own. Obviously, the Jets should be better this year. But concentrating on this division, Cincinnati will have Burrow back. Baltimore's going to play with a chip on their shoulders after being embarrassed at home by Kansas City. And we know how talented they still are, even though they've made a lot of moves. And Pittsburgh's been making the playoffs with no quarterbacks. Now they have 2.
Maybe 2, Bruce. It depends upon whether Russell Wilson is Russell Wilson of old or Russell Wilson of late, of which he's really, really gone backwards. But nonetheless, they're in a lot better shape. at least quarterback-wise, the Steelers are.
Your thoughts on the Browns?
Well, this is a football team, Bruce, that I've been asked a lot on the radio here about, what I think. And when I get to my conclusion, and then they yell at me and say, "You're a homer, you're a homer, you're a homer." Well, I'm not a homer. I'm a homer at heart, but I'm not a homer when it comes to handicapping football. And when I look at the Cleveland Browns, I do this just like I do every other team in football. And I put tape over the names of the teams and look at the teams and what they've done, what they're going to do, expected to do statistically this year. And if you put tape over the names of the teams and you put tape over the name of the Cleveland Browns, we're looking at a team here, Bruce, that not only brings back the number one ranked overall total team in defense last year, they bring back the best running back in all of the National Football League this year. And they bring back a quarterback that is absolutely, as you know, Bruce, on the hot seat and I think is set to deliver the goods finally this year. So you put all that together and you put them in this very rugged, tough AFC North division. What it spells is a lot of value to the Cleveland Browns. They're 40-1 right now, the Cleveland Browns, to win the Super Bowl, as opposed to Cincinnati being 18-1 and Baltimore being, I think, 8 or 10-1. So you've got a lot of value to the Cleveland Browns here from that standpoint, a team that I feel could win the division as much as well as any of the three or four aforementioned teams. I like the Cleveland Browns this year in a big way, Bruce. In fact, I have them in our magazine to go so far as to win the Super Bowl.
Oh, baby. How about
Yes.
You should see the expression on Ryan's face.
Oh
right
my God,
now.
that woke me up.
He almost jumped out of his chair across the way, Mark.
I hear you.
I am giving the benefit of the doubt to Watson. And the reason is because we all know how gifted a tremendous athlete he indeed is. And I think the competitiveness in his veins is such that he's going to want to come out and disprove the critics. He wants to prove that he's worth this exorbitant amount of guaranteed money that he was given by Haslam, which made all the other owners incredibly peeved off at the Haslams. But I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt, but the pressure of the world is going to be upon him, Mark. He must exceed what Flacco did a year ago. And let's remember, Flacco did it without Chubb.
That's exactly right. He did it without Chubb. Now you're going to add Nick Chubb into the piece. That's a real nice, big, important part of the puzzle for the Cleveland Browns. And I think they also did a nice job at least keeping this defense in place this offseason here, which is really, really critically important to the football team. They went out and they added Judy, the wide receiver. Whether or not Ayuk comes here or not remains to be seen. But the bottom line here is this team is as well stocked offensively and defensively as any team in the National Football League. Then you put these pieces in place, and you're talking about the key pieces we're talking about. Nick Chubb, Deshaun Watson, this defense. Those are the ingredients that happen to teams that make it to the Super Bowl. And all you need to do, Bruce, is get to the Super Bowl, and anything can happen from that point in the game.
Yeah, but boy, this schedule is so brutal. I've said also, Mark, that I think the Browns, let me get to the schedule here. I think the Browns have really got to make their mark before the bye week. Because once that bye week occurs, they've got Pittsburgh, Denver, Kansas City, Cincinnati, Miami, Baltimore, let alone before when they're facing a lot of tough opponents, even at home.
Yeah, it's really rugged, Bruce. And that's what happens when you live life in the AFC North, because every team you're playing comes in here well fortified. They bring in good records from the previous season. So you look at their win percentage of their opponents from last year, it's always the highest in the National Football League. And these teams tend to beat each other down, if you will. So somebody is going to survive in the AFC North. We know that. Somebody's going to win this division. And I feel the Browns are best prepared to be that team this particular year and will roll the dice once they make the playoffs.
Are you concerned at all about Watson and the pressure?
Really, in truth, Bruce, I think this is the time to get on it. When you're strategizing and you're looking at pressure, and, pressure is all mental. And with Watson, I don't know if this is much pressure to him as, my God, the gauntlet that he's gone through here the last 5 years. I mean, anybody that can withstand what he withstood, tip of the hat to him for being able to do that and put himself in the position to be the man this year. And now that he's finally healthy and now that the pieces are in place, I believe that it all comes together this year for the Cleveland Browns.
Is there any concern about him being injury prone now?
Well, injury prone, was he ever injury prone before the incident happened? All the garbage, the ugliness that happened. I don't believe he was injury prone, Bruce. He took a lick or two, but he's never really missed a lot of time because of injury. And now that he's healthy here, I'm going to bank on this offensive line being one of the top 3 offensive lines in the National Football League to protect him as well as they need to protect him.
Do you have any opinion on Stefanski retaining the play calling duties as well as being overseeing as the head coach rather than giving that responsibility to the new offensive coordinator, Dorsey?
Well, Kevin Stefanski, I like him as a head coach. How can you not? The guy's won Coach of the Year 2 times in the last 4 years in the National Football League. So he's got all the credentials. There's no question about that. And the team is I read a recent article here about analytics, and sometimes people get buried in analytics and sometimes they just fall in love with them. I'm sort of in between on that. But the Browns front office is rated number 1 in the National Football League in team analytics. So, they're not going to be making any bad moves per se, many bad calls. And Kevin Stefanski is part of that. Now, how much Ken Dorsey adds to the football team remains to be seen. But I think his job is going to be working primarily with Watson, the quarterback. They're both quarterbacks. He was and they are in their careers. So I think they're going to mesh well together. And I'm going to leave it to Kevin Stefanski. I admire him as a head coach, and I think he's a real mastermind when it comes to play calling.
Another thing, too, is Dorsey's going to incorporate the 3-set wideouts, which, of course, Watson was very familiar with and utilized when he was with Houston.
Exactly. And, what would a quarterback that is on the hot seat, per se, ask for anything more familiarity? And that's exactly what he's going to be putting into this year.
Do you see 2 wild cards coming out of this division?
Absolutely. Some people even go so far as to say all 4 teams can make this division. I don't think Pittsburgh will. I think Pittsburgh is going to be exposed this football season here. And I also believe that Justin Fields will be the quarterback. He'll play more games for Pittsburgh this year than will Russell Wilson. I think Wilson is on his last leg here as a quarterback in the National Football League. But the other 3 teams inside the division are all formidable playoff teams. I feel the most disappointing team in the conference is going to be the Baltimore Ravens this year. If for no other reason, you've got in Deshaun Watson, a quarterback who has yet to prove that he can beat winning teams. When he has to step up against opposition like that, he just simply hasn't done it there before. I'm not really sold on him as a quarterback. I know he puts up MVP type numbers, but I think there's better rounded teams in the National Football League, AFC North, and I think both Cleveland and Cincinnati are better teams than the Baltimore Ravens.
And boy, what better scenario was there for that team with Jackson to represent the conference than last year, getting that game against Kansas City at home? Kansas City had previously gotten to the Super Bowl with home field advantage. They didn't need it last year because that was a decisive statement they made in Baltimore.
In Baltimore, that's the key, Bruce. They gagged in Baltimore, did the Ravens. Now, whether it was Andy Reid and out coaching, if you will, John Harbaugh, I'm still a Harbaugh fan. I don't believe he gets out coached off, but Andy Reid seldom does get out coached. And the better team did win that football game. And that's the reason we're talking about the defending Super Bowl champion, Kansas City Chiefs.
Well, here I'm showing the fans your playbook again with Reid on the cover. Yet you're saying you're high on the Browns and perhaps getting to the Super Bowl, but it's got to go through Kansas City, does it not? Are they ready to give up the throne? I don't see it. They look as strong as ever. No.
Well, here's my point, Bruce. My point is number one, they have the largest bullseye in their back that any team in the National Football League has ever had. No team's ever won 3 consecutive Super Bowls in a row. That's the target that they have in their back. Number 2, I don't think they were as impressive last year as their toting a Super Bowl trophy would indicate. You look at their offense last year; it really stepped backwards last football season here. They're going to have to hit on all cylinders this year. And you know how difficult it is to climb a mountain, get to the top of that mountain, and then come back the next year and climb that same mountain and do the same thing? That's very, very difficult, let alone having to do it 3 times in a row. I think Kansas City is going to trip up this year, and I think they'll make the playoffs, but they'll get tripped up in their first round of the playoffs this year.
John Harbaugh's brother, of course, is at L.A. Can they challenge Kansas City in that division?
I believe they can. In fact, I think you might have an MVP type player on that Charger football team in Justin Herbert. And it's going to happen largely because of Jim Harbaugh being the head coach, and he's met with nothing but success in the National Football League when he was in his career. He's been outstanding in his career doing just that. The truth of the matter is, I didn't like what he did at Michigan, and I thought that should have been exposed and laid out and penalized and all that good stuff. But bottom line is, he won a national championship. He went 15-0, and now he's the head man for a real good football team with a real good quarterback here. And I think this is Justin Herbert's breakout year. And I think they're the team that surprises Kansas City this year.
Is Denver going to be a flop again, or are they going to step forward and be a contender like has been rumored and predicted by some the last couple of years?
I don't think that they're a contender yet, Bruce. I know, the ingredients are there. Sean Payton will probably eventually make this football team a winner, but there's still a lot of uncertainty at the quarterback position. And whether or not Bo Nix is going to be that guy or not still remains to be seen. He's the number 3 man in the quarterback depth chart right now going into this first week of the preseason. That doesn't mean he'll open up the season as the number 3 man, but they're not completely yet sold on him. And until a quarterback position gets solidified, I don't think you can talk about this team being in the playoff race.
All right, now I want your opinion. I want to pick your brain on Buffalo. This is an extremely talented team. They have a great quarterback. They have a great system. But is it unfair to say that they've underachieved since the arrival of Allen? I'll leave it at that.
Well, underachieved to what degree, Bruce? To expectations? Whose expectations? The sports writers, the fans, whatever it happens to be. I think if you take a look at what Buffalo's done, they've got some pretty lofty stats there behind them. I know they fell short last year, and they had a lot of disarray and a lot of problems last year. That defense was really, really banged up, but they held their own doing just that. And when they made that offensive coordinator change, when they booted Ken Dorsey out of there, this football team ignited down the stretch. I don't think people realize how good this football team was. They won 7 of their last 8 football games, and the only loss was to Kansas City in that playoff game, and they lost by a touchdown there. I think this is the team to beat in the AFC East. And if I had to go so far as to put the puzzle all together, I would say it's Cleveland and Buffalo in the AFC Championship game.
Oh, my boy. That's and he's still again, Mark's got Andy Reid on the cover. I still have to go back. Buffalo lost to Cincinnati at home in a blizzard. The goal is the Super Bowl. And I don't want to say the clock is ticking. Allen's still young. But that's what I meant by underachieving. This is a team. I mean, their fans have got to be frustrated, are they not?
Well, they have to be. A lot of expectations. But just go back and look at this team, Bruce. What do they win? 27, 41, 53 games they've won in the last 5 years. And you're pointing a finger at a quarterback who's met with nothing but success. Maybe not the success that the fans had hoped for, but he's still at least talented enough. My biggest concern is replacing Stephon Diggs. Because there was a lot of production there, but there was also a lot of angst between the two, between Allen and Diggs. So maybe the chemistry will be better than the player himself. But if Buffalo can replace Diggs satisfactorily, they'll be the team to beat in the AFC East.
Mark is a native Clevelander, but he has since moved to Miami, and he's been down in Miami for decades. As you know, I now winter in Florida, and I spend Christmas and New Year's in Marathon in the Keys, so we get in Marathon Miami television, which is what Mark gets and where he lives. Miami folded going down the stretch, and those fans and the media were relentless on them because of the high expectations. Your thoughts on them this year?
Well, they should have been all over Mike McDaniel and the fold job that they did last football season here. They got out to an unbelievable start. They put up 70 points in the football game, number 1 offense in the league, and then completely wilted and disappeared. And it's become a Mike McDaniel characteristic here now. I've said this before, and I'm going to repeat it again. You have to watch this closely, Bruce. He gets completely outcoached in the second half of football games. His team allows more points than they've scored in the second half of his games in his career with Miami. You can't do that and be a real contender for anything. I think he gets out-X'd and O's in those particular games. He's going to have to step up the goods because there's talent there. They signed Tua to a long-term contract. Tyreek Hill, arguably the best player, maybe in the National Football League as far as wide receivers are concerned anyway. And their defense did a nice job. They lost a couple of key players, but they picked up a couple of key players here. I think they'll give Buffalo all they want this year, but it's all going to depend upon how well they fare in the second half of their football games this year.
How about the Jets with Rodgers back?
A lot's expected from the Jets, mainly because it's Aaron Rodgers. I don't buy into the hype because I think Aaron Rodgers, you got a 40-year-old quarterback who's injured, and you really shouldn't realistically expect a lot. But what I do admire about the Jets is the job the defense has done. My goodness, a top 6 the last 2 years running. And if that defense can hold the fort, per se, until Rodgers can find a bit of a rhythm, I think this team can be a playoff team.
I haven't mentioned the South. Is there anything there? I mean, I guess Jacksonville, but there's another team that hasn't really proven they're ready to go to that upper echelon with Trevor Lawrence.
No, they haven't. And I read a nice stat about Trevor Lawrence here in his career. He's yet to throw the ball for more than 7.1 yards pass per attempt. And he has to step his game up. There's no question about that. But I think the team to watch in this South here is going to be the Indianapolis Colts this year. And it's not because I'm a big Anthony Richardson fan. It's because of what the Colts did without Anthony Richardson last year. They really stepped up and delivered the goods. They didn't collapse like they were expected to do. It's a football team that really put a really rock-solid season together. Now that he's back, I think this is the team to beat here. I think they're going to be very formidable, and I think they'll make the playoffs.
I don't think the NFC is nearly as strong as the AFC. Disagree if you will. But to me, it's clearly, again, San Francisco, maybe Detroit, no?
Yeah, but I'm not a real big Detroit admirer. I know what they did was good, impressive, and the whole world got behind them. That's my problem, Bruce. The whole public is behind the Detroit Lions here. And, what goes up does come down. That's the law of averages or the return to the norm. And I fully expect that to happen to the Detroit Lions this year. They won more games last year than they did their previous 2 years combined. And that usually ends up biting teams the following year. So you're left with, like you say, the San Francisco 49ers, who are arguably the best team in the conference here, but they have to prove themselves. Kyle Shanahan finally step up and win a big football game. He hasn't been able to do that thus far. He's had a lot of talent, a lot of good defense in that football team, but they're going to have to also show themselves this year.
Can they get challenged in their division? Maybe the Rams?
Maybe the Rams. I think the Rams are a sneaky good football team this year, and you're adding Kupp to the mix again here. He's finally healthy again last year. You had Nakua, the wide receiver, who came out of nowhere last year and set all these records last football season. It looks like a big year for Matthew Stafford is on tap this year. The question is, can they replace the big guy Aaron Darnold on the defense? Probably not, but at least they can hold the fort, plug the gap. I think the Rams will be a playoff team this year.
Let me go back to the North, where you have Green Bay dwelling. You mentioned your thoughts on Detroit. Green Bay is there. Chicago, of course, made some big moves. I haven't been able to figure out the Bears ever since I lived there as a kid. They're just such a discombobulated organization, except for 1 or 2 years. But that's a tough, balanced division, and Minnesota can't be taken for granted either.
No, this is a division that's up for grabs. You can see the AFC North is up for grabs. It's because everybody is really talented. This division, the teams are not really talented. So who wins? Who's the guy that through osmosis goes to the top of the division here? Likely the Green Bay Packers. They put on a strong show last year. Jordan Love finally had his breakout year last football season. But I'm going to tell you this, Bruce. The team you got to watch this year is the Chicago Bears. And it's sort of hard to say that. I always like these bad teams to look for them to turn good. But you look at the way they played last year. This football team really, really played well coming down the stretch last football season here. Now you're going to add a quarterback that is supposed to, and I'm going to say that's supposed to, be the man, be the franchise. And if they can step up and do just that, I think the Bears can challenge for the North this year.
Isn't that interesting indeed? Going to the East, obviously, there's Dallas, Philadelphia, the Giants. They're another team that who knows what's going to come out of there. But your thoughts on that Eastern Division?
Well, I'm certainly not going to use the Dallas Cowboys here this year. It was 20 years in a row. Nobody's won that division back-to-back years. It was Dallas, the reigning champion this year. So if you stick with that pattern, you want to throw them out. Who does that leave then, Bruce? It leaves the Philadelphia Eagles, I think, as a standout team inside the division. And they're really, really a talented football team. They started out so good, so strong last year, and then the bottom just completely went out on that football program here. I think they've got a lot to prove. Philadelphia will be the best team inside that division, and Philadelphia will make the playoffs and drive hard to make the Super Bowl.
How about our old buddy Baker Mayfield and Tampa Bay? Are they the team to beat in the South?
Something unusual that I read, Bruce, and it was there's only, I believe, like 5 teams that have made the playoffs each of the last 3 years, and Tampa Bay is one of them. It's hard to believe that, but they are. And Mayfield had a great year. He got himself the big payday for doing what he just did last year. But it's still what I thought was a mediocre at best football team last year that caught a lot of teams napping. They sort of didn't get up for the Tampa Bay Bucks this year. They will get up for the Tampa Bay Bucks this year, which means they're going to have to play better this year than they did last year. And I think with Mayfield being kind of I'm going to say not a hog, because he did sign that big contract, but I don't know if he'll have that drive this year that he had last year.
Well, obviously injuries always play a major part in the season. You can't predict injuries. Every team will get their share of injuries, though. So when it comes down to depth charts, who stands out among all the teams in the NFL? A couple of examples.
Well, when you're talking depth charts, where everybody's looking is basically on the offensive and the defensive lines, because that's where football games are won and lost. There's no question about that. So you have to start with who has the best offensive and who has the best defensive lines. That's where the Cleveland Browns come into play. That offensive line, I've seen them ranked number 1, 2, and 3 by different scouting sources. Their defensive line is also ranked 1, 2, or 3. That's really, really good. That's the key to looking for depth in National Football League teams. Find those teams that have those good lines and then pair all the talent around that. So that's why I have Cleveland Browns as being an upstart team this year.
Here it is. It's the playbook. Playbooksports.com you can reference, but again, Mark, how do the fans get this 256-page encyclopedia?
Well, Bruce, it's real easy. You can log on at playbooksports.com. You can download a copy instantly, a PDF version. You'll have it in your hands in seconds, or we'll ship you a printed version, which, like Bruce and I, like to have that book in our hands. I'm a little bit more so old school that way. I love to be able to read it in my hands.
Right.
You can do that. We'll ship you out a copy by way of priority mail. You can just check it out all online at playbooksports.com. Also, Bruce, at Barnes & Noble stores, by the way. So if you're around at Barnes & Noble, check it out. You'll probably find that playbook in there as well.
One and only Mark Lawrence, editor-publisher of the Playbook, playbooksports.com. We will be featuring Mark throughout the season, as we have in the past, starting with the show right before Labor Day weekend, right, Mark, when all the college games really get underway? There's like 40-some.
Yeah, we're going to have 40 games on tap for the first full week of college football. I'm looking forward to diving into it, Bruce, for sure.
Looking forward to featuring you once again. You're the best, pal. Thank you, Mark. Talk to you then.
Have a great day, Bruce. Thanks, and be well.
All right, we'll be back in a minute with the Ask Bruce segment. We'll give you an update on the Olympics as well here on Bonus Time with Drennan on the Big Play Sports Network. Now, here is the risk that Browns had to take with All right, back with Bonus Time with Drennan with Big Play Sports Network. Have you regained your composure, Ryan, after Mark predicted that the Browns may indeed get to the Super Bowl this year?
Yeah,
in my peripheral vision, looking at the camera as I am right now, I could see Ryan.
I
was worried about him having a seizure.
I damn near fell out of my chair, Bruce. I mean, anytime you hear the Browns synonymous with Super Bowl, I think that would make any Clevelander skin crawl, like in a good way. You'd get goosebumps. I mean, and to hear that, because I know, and I've talked about it. Mark Lawrence last year made me some bread. He definitely made me some dough on his picks, and I know he's a very, very intelligent man, and you can tell by the way he talks. His knowledge is endless, and to hear a mind of his talk that highly about the Cleveland Browns, I don't know how it couldn't make you excited.
Yeah. Anything else he said stand out to you?
I guess the Bills. He mentioned the Bills AFC Championship game against the Browns. That is a totally non-common pick. I think a lot of people are higher on the Browns. I mean, yeah, like you said, it's going to be hard to replace Stephon Diggs, as talented as Josh Allen is. Sean McDermott, question if he could win big games. That'll be interesting, though. But thinking about a Buffalo-Cleveland AFC Championship game, I think that's just what the NFL needs.
I found it interesting what he said about Detroit. I think a lot of people are, based on what Campbell did last year, are going to jump on that Lions bandwagon. And he doesn't necessarily think so at all.
Yeah, I mean, Detroit is a team that's super easy to root for, especially Browns fans. We know that because they have a long history of struggling just like us. But I mean, at the end of the day, I could see it. He mentioned they won more games that season than they did two combined. Jared Goff, well, he's a formidable quarterback. He's not a superstar quarterback. And you need that kind of talent to beat teams like the 49ers, to beat teams like the Eagles with Jalen Hurts. And I'm not sure he has it in him. And is Dan Campbell a great coach? Yeah, he's proven it. But I don't know if he's able to take that team, if they're ready, to that level.
And Campbell himself better not put him in a position to be second guessed as much as he was too, especially in the playoffs a year ago. I also found it interesting what he said about Pittsburgh. I don't necessarily agree. Somehow, some way, Tomlin and the Steelers find their way to the playoffs, let alone with these two quarterbacks. He's certainly down on Wilson, but he thinks Fields is going to be the guy. I don't know. I mean, the division is just, I think the four teams are just going to beat up on each other all year.
Yeah, I kind of agree, though, with that it'll be Justin Fields at the end of the regular season. He'll play more than Russell Wilson. I mean, you brought in two guys. One is a seasoned vet who's won a Super Bowl, but on the twilight of his career. And then the other guy has been, a bust so far, relatively, who has untapped potential. And they're financially not really tied to either one of them. So it really is, when they say open competition there in Pittsburgh, they really do mean it. And I think Justin Fields will have, at the end of the day, probably, I guess, a better season, because I think he will play more games. And I think ultimately he'll be their starting quarterback. But like you said, it's hard to count out Tomlin anytime.
Well, the Browns will open up Saturday against the Green Bay Packers, so we get things underway. And before you know it, the regular season will be upon us, and we'll be all over it here on Bonus Time with Drennan. All right, I want to shift gears to the Olympics, where the United States now has, going into today's competition in Paris, the most gold medals, a couple more than China, 24 to 22, 86 total medals. That's not even close. China's next with 59, then Australia with 35, France and Great Britain with 46. I enjoyed, let me preface, when it comes to golf, the four majors, if I can't watch it all live in its entirety every day, I tape it and I watch it. And I can't be more entertained than I am by the majors, although the PGA peeved me off this year, 20 under par, give me a break. But the Olympics, since they have inserted golf into the Olympics, I'm really into it. These, even though they're playing individually, they're so into their national pride, and Scotty Scheffler came out of nowhere to win the gold medal. Tommy Fleetwood's got to be just frustrated as could be. Here the guy doesn't even make the cut in the British Open, and he wins the silver, and Matsuyama, representing Japan, took the bronze. Did you see any of the golf, Ryan?
Yeah, I was able to catch the last round where Scotty Scheffler just went absolutely unconscious, a 62 to claim it. Now, it's interesting, right? Because now you have Scotty Scheffler, who won the Masters, wins the Olympic gold. Vice versa, you have Xander Schauffele, who has two majors this year. You got to wonder, who right now is the best golfer in the world?
Right.
I guess maybe Scotty would be the answer. But when it comes down to player of the year, how do you weigh that? A Master and an Olympic gold,
I think
or
you
two
gotta
majors?
give it to Schauffele. I mean, player of the year will include all the other tournaments, which, of course, Scheffler cleaned up on, so he'll probably get it. But to me, at the end of the day, at the end of the career, you judge these guys by the majors.
Absolutely.
But I do think this gold medal competition in the Olympics is very welcomed by golf fans around the world. And that course looked intriguing, too. Track and field were cleaning up like we anticipated that we would. The basketball, likewise, both men and women. I'm sure you've watched some of that, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, the women are just hands down, far and away, the best team. It's not even close. And same for the men's. The gap is a little less there in men's.
Beat Brazil by 30, 40 points.
Yeah, but a gold medal is all but expected.
Yeah, absolutely. Swimming, of course, Australia always formidable. Great Britain had an unbelievable relay team, but the U.S. is just tremendous in swimming. Always has been, always will be, I think. Gymnastics, especially the women, just off the charts, tremendous. Biles becomes the all-time medal winner, and so they have just captivated the imagination of gymnast fans all over the world. Volleyball, too, especially the beach volleyball. I've enjoyed watching it, especially the women and the men, too, but more so the women. And I can't believe the defense they play with only two participants in that. That's a lot. It doesn't look like it necessarily on television. That's a lot of territory to defend when these opponents are spiking on you at, incredible velocity, and they're going down into the sand and digging them out defensively, that fascinates me. And how they can anticipate where the spike is going to go.
And anybody who's played sand volleyball, even just recreationally, knows when you go down into the sand, it's not as easy to get up as it is just the ground. You're digging yourself out. And just doing that over and over and over again, it is so tiring. And you got to really have the endurance of just an amazing athlete. And they are.
Sounds like my producer's got a little bit of experience there with that response, don't you think?
I played volleyball in my days, Bruce. Not nowhere near Olympic level, that's for sure. But I played a good amount of volleyball in my days. I love the sport. I'd like to think I was.
Ask Bruce segment, fire.
Alrighty, well, real quick before we go to that, I want to give a shout out because Olmsted Falls native Katie Moon, we're taping right now. I think it's actually about to tip off. She's going for her back-to-back gold medal in the pole vault.
Yes.
Coming up. So best of luck to her, and I think she's going to get it done, and I'm very excited. It's awesome to see somebody there.
I interviewed her when she won before, 4 years ago?
Yeah.
And yeah, just a delightful young woman and brings local pride big time to our community.
Alrighty, we'll start here. Hey, Bruce, do you foresee 3 AL Central teams, of course, Cleveland, Minnesota, and Kansas City, qualifying for October baseball?
It very well could come down to that. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier when I was talking about the baseball, you've got Minnesota entering today at 63-49, Kansas City 63-52. Obviously, Baltimore or New York is going to get one of those wild card positions. Forget the West. I mean, Houston has relinquished first place to Seattle. Boston's 10 above the 500 mark. So it will be interesting between Minnesota, Kansas City, and Boston. There'll be an odd team out there, but yeah, it very well could come down to the winner and then the two of the wild cards coming out of our division. Very much so, that could happen.
Alrighty, well, next one, staying in AL Central, but not in a good way. Hey, Bruce, is this White Sox team the worst you've seen in the live ball era in your years of watching baseball? And if not, are they close?
I think when the New York Mets came into the league back with Casey Stengel as their manager for nostalgic purposes, that they were pretty horrible. We've seen some bad ones over the years. Baltimore, of course, is one of the top teams in baseball now, but they went through a long drought since the retirement of Earl Weaver. But gosh, are they in a state of disarray or what? And I'll tell you what, Baltimore made a nice pickup in Eloy Jimenez, former White Sox player. But the thing is, can they keep him on the field? He's so injury prone. But yeah, what a pathetic case. And here's the thing. The White Sox have always been having to overcome the gigantic Mount Rushmore, obstacle of the Cubs. The Cubs are so popular, they can stink and sell out. And the south side of Chicago isn't exactly the best place to take your kids these days, especially at night, even though it's very, very well patrolled. But the police have got other things to worry about, too, with the state of disarray crime-wise on the south and the west sides of Chicago. So, yeah, I think the White Sox are really in a state of disarray, and their future is bleak, not bright.
Already flipping to that's so funny. I totally agree. Oh, poor White Sox fans. Flipping to football. Hey, Bruce. Kevin Stefanski announced that Deshaun Watson will not play in the preseason opener against Green Bay, but would you like to see him play in the preseason at all this season?
Well, I think he'll get a few reps. Yeah, because you want to get him in game action against a live opponent. You don't want to keep him in there long. You don't want to risk him. The so-called dress rehearsal of the past, to me, is, to me, it doesn't mean much. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way, and I think that trend has changed in the NFL because of the injury possibility. So, no, that doesn't bother me at all. Scrimmaging with other teams as they do, getting him in there, maybe a couple of reps, but you do not want to risk an injury in the preseason, especially as important a year as this is forthcoming for our team.
Alrighty, last one. Hey, Bruce, agree or disagree? ESPN's Brian Windhorst came out and said that he believes this year's USA men's basketball team is deeper than the 1992 Dream Team was.
Boy, I don't know. That team was so loaded. I mean, Michael Jordan, Larry Bird was on that team. Magic Johnson, it was just incredible. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, it was just an unbelievably loaded team. It's a point of debate for fun on a show like that, that's like saying who was better, Barry Bonds or Willie Mays or Frank Robinson or you can go on and on about that. But but I don't put much stock in it one way or the other. This is a very talented team, there's no question, and they're showing it with the margin of victory that they're portraying. I mentioned they beat, Brazil by almost 40 points, whatever it was. So, yeah, hands down they, and the women too. The women are just as dominant. I mean, you talk about a deep team. Say what you want about Caitlin Clark not being on that team and snubbed, but you really can't argue that any of the current members of the U.S. women's team don't deserve to be on that roster, because they do. Well, that's all the time we have for this version of Bonus Time with Drennan here on the Big Play Sports Network. I'm Bruce Drennan on behalf of Ryan Smith, my producer. You have a wonderful week. We'll be back with you next week. Plenty to cover. The Browns preseason will be underway. We'll be a week closer to the baseball playoffs with our Guardians. The Olympics will be concluding, and a lot more chit-chat. And we welcome you firing away those questions here in the Ask Bruce segment. So have a good one. We'll see you next week. Until then, as always, and most importantly, you remember, I love you.